Two women, two different centuries, both waking up as strangers to the people who love them, both being told the same lie by the same kind of doctor. Episode 2 is where Silo finally shows its hand and reveals that Juliette isn't the first person this has ever happened to. She's just the latest. Welcome back. Today we're breaking down Silo Season 3, Episode 2, the episode where the two timelines finally start talking to each other. We're covering the clinic scenes with Daniel and Charlotte, what's really going on with the memory drug, the marketplace meeting Juliette's been building toward, a genuinely wild reveal about Sheriff Billings, and a 2-week countdown that just got set on the entire Silo. Let's break it down. Quick recap. Episode 1 ended with Juliette finding a note hidden in her soup bowl, telling her to burn it and show up at the marketplace at 2. She burned it. This episode picks up almost immediately. No time skip, straight back into the tension. Early on, in the before times, Anna Thurman, the senator's daughter, asks Daniel a question that ends up defining this entire hour. Who are we, if not the sum of our memories? On paper, that sounds almost comforting, philosophical, but the show spends the next 45 minutes proving how genuinely terrifying that idea becomes once someone else gets to control the answer. When Daniel visits Charlotte at the clinic and finds she doesn't recognize him, he meets the physician overseeing her care. He explains what's been done to her in a chillingly gentle metaphor. It's like lowering a drawbridge between a person and their own memories. Once that drawbridge is raised, her memories are technically still in there. She just can't reach them anymore. Leave it too long, and the disconnection becomes permanent. The intention, he says, is to taper off the treatment down the road and let everything resurface on its own. He frames it almost poetically, that a person is really just a collection of stories they've told themselves, an internal biography, and that with Charlotte having just survived something traumatic, they can choose to leave certain chapters out when they rebuild her. He mentions they can use personal objects, relics from her life, to guide which memories resurface first. And yes, he admits, you could theoretically use the same method to implant something that never happened at all. He just doesn't see why anyone would want to. He comes across as calm, thoughtful, well-meaning, which is exactly what makes it unsettling. Luckily, the show doesn't let that framing go unchallenged. Helen Drew, the journalist introduced in the Season 2 finale, steps in and starts asking the questions everyone else in the room seems too polite to ask. How does a Navy pilot afford treatment at one of the most expensive clinics in the country? Anna's answer is that the doctor treats combat veterans for free. Helen digs deeper. This doctor's first trials, she says, were run on prison populations in countries too financially dependent on U.S. aid to refuse. His second round was on first-year military recruits who had no real say in their own treatment. In both cases, he was quite literally given permission to erase people's memories, and it was all dressed up as mercy, letting veterans forget the horrors of combat, letting former convicts forget they were ever convicts. It's a compelling pitch, right up until Helen names the actual problem. It doesn't matter how noble the intention sounds. This one man gets to decide what an entire population is allowed to remember. Anna even humanizes him further, revealing a tragedy in his own past. Years ago, he fell asleep at the wheel in a crash that took his family. But that backstory doesn't undo Helen's point. It just explains where his obsession with forgetting came from. Daniel gave up Charlotte's location without getting anything in return. Helen doesn't waste that opening. She shows up at the clinic pretending to be Daniel's assistant and takes Charlotte outside for air. Charlotte's initially just relieved to see a face that isn't her brother's, until Helen reveals who she actually is, and that they'd met before. When Helen pulls out her notepad to jog her memory, it works. Charlotte gets a flash, not unlike the ones we're watching Juliette experience, and immediately shuts down, upset. Outside the clinic, we spot the same man from the metro station who appeared to be tailing Charlotte back in Episode 1, still watching. Inside, Daniel walks in on the doctor guiding Charlotte through a breathing exercise, the exact technique we've already seen Camille use on Juliette back in Silo 18. Same method, same century-spanning playbook. Afterward, Helen clarifies for Daniel that their earlier meeting wasn't her fishing for a story. Charlotte approached her first, having read Helen's work and trusted her. Charlotte had doubts about her own mission before it happened, doubts she couldn't voice through official channels, and she hoped Daniel's political position could dig up answers Helen couldn't get alone. Helen goes even further, asking whether the dirty bomb attack on DC was even real. She points out that Charlotte's unit had their jets stripped of modern communications equipment and loaded with bunker-buster payloads, details that line up with what Senator Thurman already told Daniel. And that raises an obvious question. If the rest of Charlotte's unit died in that crash, why was she specifically sent to a facility built around erasing memory, instead of simply being treated for her injuries?
Two small details worth flagging. First, the repeated mentions of Georgia tie back to a relic from Season 1, the children's travel guide Amazing Adventures in Georgia, that helped kick off the show's entire mystery. Second, Charlotte slips and calls her brother Donald at one point, a nod to the books, where Daniel's character was originally named Donald before the show changed it. Meanwhile, back in Silo 18, Juliette stares at the note she was supposed to burn, and did burn, and it triggers a flash memory. Shirley, standing in her holding cell, in the hours right before she got sent out to clean. Combined with the phrase from the note referencing good in supply, it sends her looking for Martha Walker. Shirley actively avoids Juliette in the construction area, and Knox is the one who finally explains why. Shirley camped outside Juliette's recovery room for 10 straight days, refusing to leave her side. And when Juliette finally woke up and looked right through her like a stranger, it broke something. Shirley hasn't been able to face her since. It's a completely understandable reaction, even if it means one of Juliette's closest friends is now the hardest person for her to reconnect with. Martha takes the opposite strategy. She doesn't pretend nothing's changed. She just meets Juliette as she is now, over coffee, and lets her in on the fact that they were close enough that Martha once risked her life for her. She also delivers the most quietly devastating character read of the episode, that the old Juliette always trusted her gut over everything else. So when Juliette admits she has no idea whether to trust her gut about going to this meeting, Walker gets up, hands back Juliette's old multi-tool, a relic she doesn't even recognize anymore, and simply tells her to try harder. Inside the vault, the algorithm reveals something significant. 6 silos have already undergone a full memory reset in the past, including Silo 18 itself, roughly 140 years ago. This lines up directly with Season 1's Freedom Day mythology. That so-called victory over the rebellion, the one the silo celebrates every year, is in reality a cover story for what Salvador Quinn actually did. Before Quinn, uprisings happened roughly every 20 years. Evidence of that cycle was literally carved into a wall Knox found earlier in the show. Quinn's solution was to erase the historical record entirely, wipe the servers, destroy the books, blame the rebels for it, and lace the water supply with the same suppression compound now being used on Juliette. Freedom Day is a manufactured story, exactly like the refuge hut cover story Camille is currently feeding Juliette. It's a big information dump, but it lands better here than it did in the Season 2 finale, because the show finally connects it to something we're watching happen in real time. We also see a porter named Kent already pulling the vitamin D plus barrels, the disguised memory suppressant, setting up Camille to essentially repeat Salvador Quinn's playbook on a silo-wide scale, not just on one mayor. Sheriff Paul Billings gets real weight this episode for 3 converging reasons. First, Orla, the supply department's shadow who clashed with Harwood back in episode 1, has gone missing, and even Carla can't locate her. Orla's sister comes to Billings directly to file the report. Second, Billings is quietly rewriting portions of the pact, despite not fully believing in it anymore, ever since he glimpsed the outside world through a forbidden relic back in Season 2, which explains the flat, deflated energy in his council speech last episode. And third, the biggest gut punch, it's revealed that Billings' own wife, Kat, is the outsider raider caught on security footage with the injured forearm from the episode 1 suit room break-in. The man in charge of hunting the rebels is married to one of them and doesn't know it yet. Juliette makes it to the meeting. Waiting for her are Sandy, Danny, and Patrick Kennedy, the people behind both the note and the helmet theft from the premiere. They don't have a grand plan to hand her, but they do show her something crucial. The helmet stolen from Silo 18's suit room is numbered differently than the one Juliette actually wore coming back. Hers is marked 17. That mismatch, an artifact from a lived memory rather than a fed narrative, cracks open another splinter of memory from her time in Silo 17. Because Sims once offered to erase Kennedy's own memories back in Season 2, the group is convinced the vitamins are doing exactly the same thing to Juliette, silencing the only living person who's actually been outside and come back. After the meeting, Juliette starts trying to avoid taking the pills altogether, which lines up with an earlier detail, a suppression capsule that turned up lodged in her apartment drain, evidence she's already been quietly resisting.
The most pressing loose thread of the episode is Lucas Kyle. He's been missing for roughly 92 days, essentially since the moment Juliette returned. The last confirmed sighting was the Season 2 finale, when the algorithm warned him that revealing what he'd learned about the safeguard would trigger it. He went to be with his mother before Sims caught up with him, and nothing since. Both security and the outsiders are actively searching for him and coming up empty, which either means he's hiding with real skill or he's gone looking for more answers somewhere no one's checked. Either way, as one of the few people outside the vault who actually knows the truth, he's clearly being set up as a major key to whatever comes next.
Back in the vault, the algorithm shows Camille a chart. One line tracks the calming, stabilizing effect Juliette's presence as mayor has had on the silo, and a second line tracks the risk she poses if the memory protocol fails and her real memories return. If those two lines cross, Juliette stops being useful to keep around. But removing her abruptly carries its own danger, since a devoted following calling themselves the Juliettes has already formed around her as something close to a folk hero. The algorithm is boxed in. It can't let her stay dangerous, and it can't afford to lose her suddenly either. The episode closes with porters hauling the vitamin D plus barrels up the stairwell toward water filtration, a multi-day operation that can only move at night. A 2-week countdown is now effectively running on the entire silo. Let's talk characters for a second. Charlotte is functionally Juliette's mirror in the before times, a woman who survived something the people in power would rather erase than explain, now trapped in a facility built to make her forgetting look like healing. Helen Drew is the show's clearest voice of scrutiny in either timeline, refusing to let a well-dressed justification pass as an actual answer. Sheriff Billings is a man enforcing rules he's stopped believing in, now facing the very real possibility that his own household is part of the resistance he's supposed to be hunting. And Martha Walker is the one person in Silo 18 who isn't trying to manage Juliette's reality. She's trying to get the real Juliette to surface on her own terms. Thematically, this episode is built entirely around Anna's opening line, "Who are we, if not the sum of our memories?" and then spends 45 minutes stress testing it from every angle. In the before times, memory erasure is dressed up in therapeutic language, healing, closure, a fresh start. In Silo 18, 3.5 centuries later, the exact same tool is dressed up in civic language, stability, order, the greater good. Strip away the framing in both cases, and it's the same act. One person or institution deciding what another person is allowed to know about their own life. The episode also makes a sharper point than it did in the premiere. Forced forgetting doesn't actually stick. Objects, phrases, and physical sensations, a helmet, a notepad, a breathing exercise, keep punching through the drawbridge in both timelines, suggesting that whatever's erased isn't really gone. It's just buried, waiting for the right key. A few things worth watching for. The mismatched helmet numbers, 17 versus 18, as the visual proof that finally breaks through Juliette's suppressed memory. The identical breathing exercise used on both Charlotte and Juliette, same method, centuries apart. The amazing adventures in Georgia callback, embedded in the dialogue. Charlotte accidentally calling Daniel Donald, a wink to book readers. And the capsule found in Juliette's drain, quietly confirming she's already fighting back before anyone states it outright. As for where this is heading, Billings is being set up as a pivotal swing character. Married into the resistance, enforcing a pact he's rewriting and doesn't believe in, he's one push away from switching sides entirely. Lucas Kyle likely holds the missing piece Juliette needs. Expect his eventual discovery to be the trigger point for her memories returning in full. Given the algorithm's crossing lines framework, expect the season to build toward a moment where Juliette's usefulness visibly tips into liability. That's almost certainly the mechanism that forces the next major turn. And the parallel editing between the algorithm and Daniel hints the show wants us actively speculating that the algorithm may be modeled on him. Worth watching closely as the Before Times timeline creeps closer to the founding of the silos. Which leaves us with some real open questions. Was the dirty bomb attack on DC actually real or fabricated to justify whatever the US was really doing in Iran? What did Charlotte's unit actually encounter at 50,000 feet, and why does it warrant a full memory wipe instead of a debrief? Where has Lucas Kyle been for 92 days, and what does he know that's worth staying hidden for? What happens to Billings, his marriage, and his loyalties once Kat's identity as an outsider comes to light? And with a 2-week clock now running, does Juliette get her memories back in time? Or does the silo tip toward another full reset first? That's episode 2. The episode where Silo finally proves its two timelines aren't just parallel stories, they're the same story, 400 years apart. A countdown clock is now running on Silo 18. Billings' entire life is about to blow up, and Lucas Kyle is still out there somewhere with answers nobody else has. Let me know in the comments what you think happened to that Iran mission, and whether Charlotte and Juliette's memories come back on the same timeline. Like the video if this helped, subscribe for the next breakdown, and I'll see you for episode 3.